If you have been to Mihintale, you may have seen the Kalodiya Pokona, literally the black water pond. It's an oft ignored yet breathtaking site located at the foot of Mihintale's western slopes, around which ruins of an ancient monastery and structures depicting a very advanced level of hydraulic engineering skills are very evident. Welcome to Kaleidoscope with me, Savithri Rodrigo, where we are positive, daring, and different. To our fantastic partner Selico Live CDB, The Daily Morning and Made by Her, thank you for your support. If you like Kaleidoscope, subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can now start a CDB iDeposit digital fixed deposit and experience a range of special benefits from CDB.
And taking a look at the week that was on CDB Snapshot. Starting off with some positives, Sri Lanka's official reserve assets increased by 2.2% in March from 2,694 million US dollars to 2,755 million US dollars. And while Sri Lanka added 2.5 million people into poverty in 2022, a massive 485 billion rupee welfare program will be initiated for 3.3 million from July. India extends its 1 billion US dollar credit line to Sri Lanka. The Supreme Court clears the way for Parliament to legalize same-sex relationships through a simple majority in the House. 2 new mushroom species are discovered in Sri Lanka. The Chinese yuan overtakes the dollar to become the most used currency in China's cross-border transactions. And King Charles's coronation took on a new flavour with a Welsh artist using Marmite on toast, the King's favourite sandwich, to create a work of art.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Silico Life.
And welcome to Selico Life News Capsule. Our top story is on whether policy matters. 1 year ago, Sri Lankans took to the streets wanting a system change. 1 year later, we are yet calling for policy reform. However, this has yet to become tangible. The wheels of policy reform turn slowly, but there are priority areas that can be accelerated. Political analyst Kusum Vijaythilaka popped into the studio for a discussion. If we were to look at priority policy areas, what would the 3 most important policies be that we need to put in place?
I'd start with, say, investments in education, because education has been, we've seen a lack of investments in education and health. That's been confirmed by the data, by the World Bank, by the IMF, by the ADB. So we have to make those investments in education, because if we don't educate our children going forward, we are going to have an uninformed electorate, and we're going to have voters that will vote based on personality, not on principle or policy. The second one I would say is to fix campaign finance reform, because if we just allow money to decide who is able to win the vote, who comes in from each party, who is able to contest from a party, that's not a vibrant democracy. The third one I would say is we have to fix our judiciary, because in Sri Lanka, for instance, it takes over 280 days to execute a breach of contract, a basic breach of contract. So our court system is just not efficient. The average in our region is about half the number of days it takes. So we can't be an FDI destination, we can't grow our economy if people are actively avoiding the judiciary. You and I would never go to the courts if we had a car accident to claim our insurance. We just wouldn't do that. So we can't develop as a country unless we have some trust and faith in an efficient judiciary.
In designing these policies, what should policymakers be aware of?
Well, let's take education, for instance. It's not just about investing more money. Okay, it's about improving the system. And to improve the system, we have to recognize what systems work globally. So Finland, the UK, Australia, a lot of countries have shown a different way of structuring their education system. And I think moving away from standardized testing, for instance, is one. Rote memorizing, these are things that Sri Lankans do regularly. So we have to move away from that and go into a different type of education system. So that's one. If you take the judiciary, I think it's just a matter of increasing the number of courts, increasing the efficiency, taking away incentives that are there for lawyers to just continue a case, because a case has to end at some point. When you're making a policy, you have to understand what you're trying to achieve by changing a policy.
What do you anticipate will be the bottlenecks in actually implementing these?
The bottlenecks exist in terms of our provincial school system and the national school system. Okay, they're very old systems. Some of these schools have been underfunded for decades. So you're not going to change that in 1 year. You can't bring in decades of underfunding and fix it in a year or 2 years. A system has dependence. Any system, whether it's a government, whether it's a computer system, they have dependencies. So you have to extricate those dependencies from the system. The bottlenecks are the politics itself. The politics in Sri Lanka has pervaded every aspect of our society. So if we don't depoliticize everything from the media to education to the judiciary, we're not going to get anywhere.
And here's a look at our markets this week.
At the Colombo Stock Exchange, the all-share price index remained at last week's levels, with the average daily turnover continuing to remain at lower than 1 billion rupees. News that portfolio investments have sold petroleum futures and options reversed the buying frenzy inspired by production cuts announced by Saudi Arabia and OPEC+, keeping oil prices at close to one-year lows of $73 per barrel, while gold prices held on to one-year highs, trading at above $2,000 per ounce as investors sought cover from economic uncertainty.
Gone are the days of petrol-operated lawnmowers. A solar farm in Kosovo is using sheep and goats to trim the grass. Now, isn't that a win-win for going green? If you can shriek like a seagull, well, you may just win the Seagull Imitation Championship. The third in a series held in a town in Belgium. A jury crowns the best seagull shriek. What a shriek that is. Today is Eat What You Want Day. So what better day than to have Michelin star chef Dominique Schroeter, who is chef de cuisine at the famed La Riva in Switzerland, dishing out a Michelin-starred dining experience in the timeless space of the London Grill at Cinnamon Grand. Kaleidoscope will have a ringside seat as online partner for the experience, but we would like you to be there too. So save the date, it's the 26th of May. Seating is limited, so it's best you book your seat ASAP. Colombo is the first and only capital city in the world to be named a Ramsar wetland city. This title, given in 2018, was in recognition of the relationship the city and the wetland complex had and how it integrated into urban development. However, there is little emphasis on the importance of urban wetlands in the survival of the city even now. Basically, it is with wetlands that we can create a resilient and a sustainable and inhabitable capital city for not just the present, but for the future. With me today is Dr. Chetika Gunasiri, who has a PhD in sustainability science and has more than 10 years' experience in the urban ecosystem management. She was one of those involved in the Colombo wetland management strategy and the Ramsar application. And she popped into the studio today to talk about urban wetlands. Chetika, welcome to the show. Now, for a lot of city folk like us, wetlands are just mysterious bodies of nature. What is the importance of urban wetlands?
So the urban wetland is actually a wetland which is located in a city or a peri-urban area. We call it as a wetland. Now, urban wetland is very, very important for the survival of the city because especially it absorbs the rainwater, storm water, so it avoids the flooding, and it has ability to purify the polluted water in the city and also filters the air because it has like high vegetation. Also it gives like multiple opportunities for urban recreation as well as tourism, and also most importantly these are the only green spaces in most of the cities which provides refuge for like urban wildlife. The wetlands are considered as the most productive ecosystem in among all the ecosystems because of its structure and the nature. Therefore, it's very, very important for the well-being of urban life.
So it sounds to me like wetlands are the lungs of a city. What do wetlands have to do with city development?
Now, we know that cities are there like thousands of people living in a very small space. So, if you take about the Earth's surface, like only 2% of like Earth's surface is taken by the cities. But it produces like 70% of the waste in the entire global waste generation, and 70% of the natural resources in the whole world is utilized by these urban people. So it's very important like to integrate these functions given by the urban wetlands for the threats, that the challenges that cities have been created because of this urbanization as well as the pollution.
What is the Colombo Wetland Complex?
So the Colombo city, it's naturally located in the downstream of the Culinary river basin. So naturally it's a floodplain area, it's a low-lying area which prone to the floods. And also Colombo city is located on the mosaic of wetland, which is we call as now Colombo Wetland Complex. This complex has like around 36 patches of wetlands which are interconnected with the Colombo Canal network, which is completely man-made. So this is the total area of this Colombo wetland complex is about 1,900 hectares. The cities entirely depend on the functions providing by this Colombo wetland complex. The population is around like 2.4 million, and also most important area of the country because we have commercial capital as well as administrative capital, both are located inside this, and the 50% of the country's GDP is earned by this the area where that Colombo wetland complex is located.
If we lose our wetlands, what are the consequences?
If I take Colombo city, I would simply say Colombo will not be a livable place because 37% of the rainwater comes to the Colombo metropolitan area. It's absorbed by this wetland complex, Colombo wetland complex. Imagine what will happen if this wetland complex disappeared. So the entire Colombo will be under flooded even for a small rain. Colombo wetland complex provide 15 billion rupees worth of flood saving function for the Colombo city every year. And the wastewater treatment functions that it does is 2 billion. So if these wetlands are not there, so we have to spend 2 billion every year for wastewater. So if there are no wetlands in Colombo, Colombo will face like frequent floods, water pollution and related health issues, and the stress that people might have because the city is now getting more and more urbanized, and so this will simply become a like unlivable place.
Well, as humans, we have to look after our lungs. So if we want to survive, we have to look after our city's lungs. Who do we call foreigners? While we do believe that they may be from another country or speak another language or are from another community, can they also embrace multiple identities, multiple nationalities and multiple languages, multiple communities, but still not belong to one? Ideally titled The Foreigners, the exhibition is curated by Sandev Handy and Shamini Pereira. Sandev, what came across your mind when you were curating these 15 artists?
Well, I think I was looking at artists and their practices in a way that look at foreignness in a very complex way. Artists who straddle a sort of in-between identity, place and their relationship to home, and introduce that into their artwork in very, very sort of complicated and complex and critical ways.
What stood out?
I think the ways in which so many of the ideas that the artists individually are working through from their own experiences actually connect to some other artists' work, and they're also connecting to people of the public who are coming to see the exhibition.
So what's the message you want these pieces to give out?
I think to understand the identity of a foreigner, an outsider and a stranger as really significant identities to take on for yourself and to look at the world through that lens and how you find in those places in which people don't fit into typical categories, and how the world doesn't allow people to fit into those typical categories, and how we might look back at the world in a much more careful way when we see the people who are left out of the kind of careful categories and places in which we label people in particular.
So make sure to stop by the MMCA this weekend, and we'll see you next week.